My name is Jessica Miller. I'm 32 years old, and this is the story of how I was betrayed by the people I thought were my family. The title of today's video is, My Dad Messaged Me During Lunch. Do not drink. Trust me, you'll thank me later. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll understand why those 6 words saved my life. It was a normal Tuesday afternoon, or at least that's what I thought when I sat down at that restaurant table surrounded by smiling faces. But nothing about that day was normal, and nothing about those smiles was real. You won't believe what happened next. And I need you to stay with me until the very end because this story has twists you absolutely cannot miss. If you've ever felt like something was wrong but couldn't quite put your finger on it, then this story is for you. And I'd love it if you hit that subscribe button and give this video a like right now. Why? Because what I'm about to share with you isn't just my story of survival. It's a roadmap for anyone who's ever been manipulated by the people they trusted most. Have you ever had that gut feeling that someone close to you was hiding something? Drop a comment below and let me know, because I want to connect with every single one of you who understands what it feels like to question your own reality. Your support means everything to me, and by subscribing, you're joining a community of people who refuse to be victims anymore. Plus, you'll want to see how this whole nightmare unfolds. Trust me on that. Let me take you back to 6 months before that lunch, to the darkest moment of my entire life. I lost my baby at 23 weeks pregnant, and if you've never experienced that kind of loss, I hope you never do. Her name was going to be Emma, and I had already painted her nursery a soft lavender color with white clouds on the ceiling. When the doctors told me there was no heartbeat, something inside me shattered into a million pieces that I didn't know how to put back together. My husband David held me while I screamed, and for weeks after, I couldn't even get out of bed without feeling like the world was crushing me. The grief was suffocating, like drowning in an ocean where every wave was a memory of what I'd lost. I stopped answering phone calls, stopped seeing friends, and barely spoke to David even though he was right there beside me every single day. My mother-in-law, Patricia, started coming over more often, bringing casseroles and sitting with me in silence. At the time, I thought she was being kind, that she genuinely cared about helping me through this nightmare. But looking back now, I can see that every visit, every helpful gesture, was part of something much darker than I could have ever imagined. David's family, Patricia, his brother Marcus, and Marcus's wife Claire, they all rallied around us, or so I believed. They'd show up unannounced, always with food, always with that concerned look on their faces that made me feel like I was supposed to be grateful. "Jessica, you need to eat something," Patricia would say, pushing a plate toward me with those perfectly manicured hands. "David is so worried about you. We all are, sweetheart." I was vulnerable, broken, and desperate for any kind of support that would make the pain stop, even for just a moment. But that's when things took a turn I never saw coming, and the manipulation that was happening right under my nose was about to reveal itself in the most shocking way possible. After Emma's death, I became a shell of who I used to be, and Patricia knew exactly how to exploit that emptiness. She started suggesting that maybe David and I should move in with her temporarily, just until I got back on my feet, she'd say with that sweet smile. At first I refused because I needed my own space to grieve, but she was persistent, showing up every single day with a new reason why staying in our house was too painful for me. "All those baby things, Jessica, they're just reminding you of what you lost," she'd whisper, touching my arm like she understood. Eventually, I was so exhausted from fighting my own thoughts that I just gave in, thinking maybe a change of scenery would help me heal. Now, before I continue with what happened next, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Why should you? Because what I'm about to reveal next is the moment I started to realize something was very, very wrong, and you'll want to see how deep this betrayal actually goes. Have you ever moved in with family and regretted it? Let me know in the comments because I want to hear your stories too. By subscribing, you're not just supporting my channel, you're telling YouTube that stories like mine matter and need to be heard. Plus, I promise you, the next part of this story is going to make your jaw drop, and you won't want to miss a single second of it. Moving into Patricia's house was like walking into a beautiful prison that I didn't even know had bars. The house was massive, a 4-bedroom colonial with perfectly trimmed hedges and a kitchen that looked like something out of a magazine. Patricia gave us the entire second floor, and she made sure to tell me every day how lucky I was to have such a caring mother-in-law. David seemed relieved, like having his mother around was taking some pressure off of him to deal with my grief. But I noticed small things right away. The way Patricia would go through our mail before giving it to us, How she'd ask David questions about our finances when I wasn't in the room, the way Marcus and Claire started showing up for family dinners 3 times a week. At these dinners, the conversation always seemed to steer toward money, toward David's job as a software engineer, toward our savings account. "You two have been so smart with your money," Marcus would say, raising his wine glass like he was toasting us. "Not many people your age have that kind of financial security." Claire would nod along, her fake smile plastered across her face as she asked invasive questions about our investment portfolio. I remember feeling uncomfortable, like they were sizing us up for something, but I was too lost in my grief to really process what was happening. David would just laugh it off, saying his family was always interested in everyone's business, that it was just how they were. But then Patricia started talking about investments, about this incredible opportunity that Marcus had found through a business associate. She'd bring it up casually, like she was just making conversation, but I noticed how her eyes would light up when she talked about the potential return. "It's completely safe, a sure thing," she'd say, looking directly at David while I sat there pushing food around my plate. "Marcus has already put in $50,000, and he's expecting to double it in just 6 months." The pressure was subtle at first, just suggestions and enthusiasm, but it was building towards something, and I was about to find out exactly what they wanted from us. The investment talk became constant, like a drumbeat that never stopped, and I started to feel like I was losing my mind. Every conversation at dinner, every coffee with Patricia in the morning, every text from Marcus, it all circled back to this opportunity that I needed to understand was going to change our lives. David started to show interest. I could see it in his eyes when Marcus would pull out his laptop and show us spreadsheets with projected earnings. "Look at these numbers, bro," Marcus would say, his finger tapping the screen with excitement. "This is generational wealth we're talking about here." I wanted to scream that we'd just lost our daughter, that money was the last thing on my mind, but my voice felt trapped somewhere deep inside my chest. I need you to pause for just a second and smash that like button, and if you haven't subscribed yet, do it right now, because what comes next is the turning point in this entire story. Why should you subscribe? Because I'm about to share the exact moment when my father stepped in and saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life, and you need to see how family betrayal can come from the people you least expect. Have you ever had someone try to pressure you into a financial decision when you were vulnerable? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Your subscription helps this channel grow and helps other people find these stories so they don't become victims too, and honestly, the community we're building here is incredible. Let me tell you about Emma more, because understanding what I lost helps you understand why I was so vulnerable to their manipulation. I had decorated that nursery with so much love, spending hours picking out the perfect crib, the softest blankets, tiny clothes that I'd hold against my chest and imagine her wearing. David and I had tried for 3 years to get pregnant, going through fertility treatments and disappointments until finally, we saw those 2 pink lines. Those 23 weeks of pregnancy were the happiest of my entire life. And when it ended, when they told me Emma was gone, I felt like someone had ripped out my soul and left me with just this empty, broken body. The grief was physical, not just emotional. I'd wake up in the middle of the night reaching for my belly, forgetting for just a moment that she wasn't there anymore. I'd walk past that nursery door and feel like I couldn't breathe, like the air itself was too heavy to pull into my lungs. David tried to be strong for both of us, but I could see him breaking too, crying in the shower when he thought I couldn't hear him. Patricia used all of this. She weaponized our pain, telling me that keeping busy with new projects and investments would help us move forward. "You can't just sit in your grief forever, Jessica," she'd say with that condescending tone that I mistook for concern. Looking back, I can see how every single conversation was designed to break me down further, to make me doubt my own instincts and judgment. They talk about how unstable I seemed, how emotional I was being, how David needed to make rational decisions for our future because I clearly wasn't capable. Claire would touch my hand across the table and say things like, "It's okay to not be okay, Jessica. Just let the men handle the business stuff." I felt like I was disappearing, like the woman I used to be, strong, confident, capable, was being erased and replaced with this fragile, helpless version that they needed me to be. But what I didn't know was that my father was watching all of this unfold, and he was about to intervene in the most unexpected way. The pressure reached a breaking point 3 months after we moved into Patricia's house, when David came to me with paperwork for the investment. His hands were shaking slightly as he placed the documents on the bed where I was lying, staring at the ceiling like I did most afternoons. "Jess, I think we should do this," he said, his voice quiet but determined. It's $150,000, which is most of our savings. But Marcus showed me everything, and it's legitimate. I sat up slowly, feeling like I was moving through water, and looked at the papers covered in legal jargon that made my head spin. David, I don't know, I whispered, but he was already explaining how this would secure our future, how we could try for another baby without financial stress, how his family had already invested and were seeing returns. Before we go any further, I'm asking you right now to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like, because what I'm about to share is the moment everything started to unravel. Why does your subscription matter? Because content like this, real stories about real manipulation, needs to reach people who are going through similar situations so they can recognize the warning signs. Have you ever felt pressured by family into a major decision? Drop a comment and let me know your experience. By liking this video, you're helping it reach more people who need to hear this message. And honestly, your support is what keeps me going and sharing these difficult memories with all of you. That night, I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning while David snored softly beside me, already convinced that this investment was our answer. Something in my gut was screaming that this was wrong, that we were being set up for something devastating. I got up at 3 a.m. and went downstairs to get water. And that's when I heard voices coming from Patricia's study. The door was cracked open just slightly, and I could hear Marcus and Patricia talking in hushed, urgent tones. "She's almost ready," Marcus was saying. "David's on board, we just need to get her to sign off on it." Patricia laughed, a cold sound that made my blood freeze. The grief has made her so pliable, it's almost too easy. I stood there in the dark hallway, my hand covering my mouth to keep from gasping out loud, listening to them discuss me like I was a mark in some kind of con. "Once they transfer the money, we'll wait 2 months and then tell them the investment fell through," Marcus continued. "By then, it'll be too late to get it back. And we split it 3 ways like we planned." Patricia responded with something about how Claire had already picked out a new car with her share. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode right there in my chest. These people, David's family, the people who had been helping us through our grief, were planning to steal our life savings and leave us with nothing. I backed away from that door as quietly as I could, my whole body trembling with a mixture of rage and terror. I went back upstairs, climbed into bed next to David, and stared at him in the darkness, wondering if he knew, if he was part of this too. Could my husband, the man I'd been with for 8 years, the man who held me when I lost our daughter, could he be involved in betraying me like this? I didn't sleep at all that night, just watched the sun come up through the window, while my mind raced with what I'd heard and what I needed to do. But I was smart enough to know that I couldn't confront them yet, not without proof, not without a plan, because if I accused them and couldn't back it up, they'd just gaslight me further and paint me as the unstable, grieving woman who was imagining things. The next morning, Patricia announced that we were all having a family lunch at Belmore's, this fancy Italian restaurant downtown that she loved. She was insistent, almost manic about it, saying we needed to celebrate our new beginning, and that she'd already made reservations for 1 o'clock. I knew exactly what this lunch was really about. They were going to pressure me in public to sign those investment papers, thinking I'd be too polite or too embarrassed to cause a scene. David was excited, talking about how nice it was that his family wanted to do something special for us. I felt sick to my stomach, knowing what I knew, carrying this secret that was eating me alive from the inside out. I'm going to ask you something important right now. Please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel if you're invested in finding out what happens next. Why should you subscribe? Because the next part of this story involves my father's mysterious message, and you absolutely need to see how one text message can change everything when you're walking into a trap. Have you ever received a warning from someone at just the right moment? Share your story in the comments below because I love reading about those moments when the universe steps in. Your subscription means more people will see this story, and maybe, just maybe, it'll help someone recognize when they're being manipulated by people they trust. I got ready for that lunch feeling like I was preparing for battle, choosing my clothes carefully, a simple blue dress that made me look put together but not suspicious. My father, Robert Miller, lived 2 hours away, and we'd been talking on the phone more frequently since Emma's death. He was the only person who seemed to really listen to me without trying to fix me or push me toward some agenda. That morning, I'd called him crying, not telling him about what I'd overheard, just saying I felt overwhelmed and trapped. "Jess, baby, you trust your gut, you hear me?" He'd said in that deep, comforting voice. "If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't." I didn't know it then, but my father had already started his own investigation into David's family. We arrived at Belmore's right on time, and the whole family was already there. Patricia in her designer outfit, Marcus in an expensive suit, and Claire dripping in jewelry that suddenly looked a lot more suspicious to me now. They'd ordered champagne, actual champagne, like this was some kind of celebration instead of what it really was, a setup. "There they are!" Patricia exclaimed, standing up to hug David while barely acknowledging me. We sat down, and immediately the conversation turned to the investment, with Marcus pulling out his phone to show us updated projections that looked even more impressive than before. My phone was in my purse, and I felt it vibrate, but I ignored it, trying to focus on not giving away that I knew exactly what they were planning. The waiter came and poured champagne into everyone's glasses, and Patricia raised hers high with that brilliant fake smile. "To new beginnings," she said, her eyes locked on mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "To family taking care of family." Everyone raised their glasses, and I reached for mine, my hand trembling slightly. That's when my phone vibrated again, insistently, and something told me to check it right then. I pulled it out of my purse, and there on the screen was a message from my dad in all capital letters. "Do not drink. Trust me, you'll thank me later." My heart stopped. My hand froze inches from that champagne glass, and suddenly everyone at the table was staring at me, waiting to see what I would do next. I set my phone down slowly, my mind racing a million miles a second, trying to understand what my father knew that I didn't. The champagne sat there in front of me, bubbles rising to the surface, and everyone was still holding their glasses in the air, waiting for me to join the toast. "Jessica," Patricia said, her voice sharp with impatience, "is everything all right?" I looked at her, then at Marcus, then at Claire, and finally at David, who just looked confused. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I just remembered I'm not supposed to drink because of the new medication my therapist prescribed." It was a complete lie, but it came out so naturally that even I almost believed it. Now, before I tell you what happened next, I need you to do me a huge favor. Smash that like button and hit subscribe, because this is where my father's warning becomes crystal clear and the whole conspiracy starts to unravel. Why is your subscription so important? Because stories like this need to be told, and your support helps this channel reach people who are currently being manipulated and don't even know it yet. Have you ever dodged a bullet because someone warned you at the last second? Tell me about it in the comments, because those stories give me chills. By liking and subscribing, you're part of a community that refuses to stay silent about family betrayal. And trust me, you're going to want to see how this whole thing plays out. Patricia's face flickered with something, annoyance, maybe even anger, but she quickly covered it with another smile. "Oh, of course, dear, we understand completely," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. Marcus and Claire exchanged a quick glance that I caught, and suddenly the whole atmosphere at the table shifted. They all drank their champagne without me, and the conversation became stilted and awkward. I excused myself to go to the bathroom, taking my purse and my phone with me. Once I was locked in a stall, I called my father with shaking hands. "Dad, what's going on?" I whispered urgently. "How did you know not to drink?" My father's voice was tight with controlled anger when he answered, "Jessica, I hired a private investigator 3 weeks ago to look into Patricia and Marcus," he said. "I didn't like how they were circling you and David. Didn't like how pushy they were being about this investment." He paused, and I could hear papers rustling on his end. "The investigator found out that this isn't the first time they've done this. They've scammed 2 other family members over the past 5 years, and both times they used some kind of sedative in drinks to make their victims more compliant when signing documents." I felt like the bathroom was spinning around me. The investigator got word this morning that they'd purchased Rohypnol from a contact, and he put 2 and 2 together that they were planning something today. I leaned against the cold tile wall, trying to process what my father was telling me. My own mother-in-law, David's brother, they were willing to drug me to steal our money. "Dad, what do I do?" I asked, tears starting to stream down my face. "You go back out there and you act normal," he instructed. "Don't let them know that you know anything. I've already contacted a lawyer and the police, and they're building a case, but we need more evidence." "Can you do that, Jess? Can you be strong for just a little bit longer?" I wiped my eyes, looked at myself in the mirror, and saw something I hadn't seen in months. A fighter. "Yes," I said firmly. "I can do this." When I returned to the table, I put on the performance of my life. I smiled, I laughed at Marcus's jokes. I even agreed that the investment sounded really interesting and that David and I would seriously think about it. But inside, I was calculating every move, watching every interaction, collecting mental evidence of their manipulation. Patricia seemed pleased, probably thinking that even without the drugged champagne, she'd still managed to get me on board. David reached over and squeezed my hand, completely oblivious to the fact that his family had just tried to drug his wife. As we left the restaurant, my phone buzzed again with another message from my dad. "Proud of you, baby girl. Now let's take them down." And that's exactly what we were going to do. That night, I couldn't tell David what I knew because I didn't know how deep his involvement went, and that uncertainty was killing me slowly. He was in the shower when I started going through his phone, something I'd never done in our entire relationship because I'd always trusted him completely. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through his messages, and what I found broke my heart into even smaller pieces than I thought possible. There were texts between David and Marcus going back months, but they weren't about scamming me. They were about protecting me. "Mom's getting too aggressive," David had written. "I don't like how she's pushing Jess when she's still grieving." Marcus had responded, "Just trust the process, bro. This investment is real and it'll help you guys." David actually believed it was legitimate. I need to pause here and ask you to please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because what I'm about to reveal is the moment I realized my husband was a victim too. Why should you care enough to subscribe? Because this story shows how manipulation doesn't just affect one person. It ripples through entire families, and understanding that could help you identify when someone you love is being used. Have you ever discovered that someone you suspected was actually innocent? Let me know in the comments because those moments of relief mixed with rage are so complex. Your subscription helps content creators like me share real, raw stories that matter, and honestly, I need your support to keep going with this painful but necessary journey. I put David's phone back exactly where I found it and sat on the edge of our bed, crying silent tears of relief and fury. Relief that my husband wasn't part of the betrayal. Fury that his own mother and brother were manipulating him just as much as they were manipulating me. When David came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, he saw my face and immediately rushed over. "Jess, what's wrong?" he asked, kneeling in front of me. I looked into his eyes. Those brown eyes I'd fallen in love with 10 years ago, and made a decision. "David, I need to tell you something, and you need to promise me you'll listen to everything before you react." His face went pale, but he nodded. "I know about the investment scam. I know your mother and Marcus are trying to steal our money." I watched David's face go through a journey of emotions. Confusion, denial, anger, and finally devastation. "No, that's not possible," he whispered, shaking his head. "My mom wouldn't do that. Marcus wouldn't." I cut him off gently but firmly. "I heard them talking about it, David. 3 nights ago, I heard them planning how they'd take our money and split it 3 ways with Claire. I told him everything. The conversation I'd overheard, my father's investigation, the attempted drugging at lunch. With each word, I watched my husband crumble, watched him realize that the family he'd trusted his entire life had been willing to destroy us. "Oh my God," he kept saying over and over. "Oh my God, Jess, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." We stayed up all night, David and me, going through everything that had happened since we moved in with Patricia. He started seeing all the red flags he'd missed, the constant questions about our finances, the way they'd isolated us from my family, how they'd used Emma's death as a weapon to make us vulnerable. "They knew I'd believe anything Marcus told me," David said, his voice hollow. "They knew I'd trust my own mother." I held him while he processed the betrayal, and in that moment, our marriage became stronger than it had been in months. We weren't just husband and wife anymore. We were partners in survival, allies against people who'd tried to destroy us. "What do we do now?" David asked. I smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. "Now we give them exactly what they want, and we make sure they never do this to anyone else again." The next morning, David and I met with my father and his lawyer, a sharp woman named Catherine Chen who specialized in financial fraud and family law. We sat in her downtown office, and she laid out exactly what we needed to do to build an airtight case against Patricia, Marcus, and Claire. "We need them to explicitly state their intentions," Catherine explained, tapping her pen on a legal pad. "We need recordings, written communications, anything that proves they knowingly tried to defraud you." My father, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, leaned forward. "How do we get them to confess when they've been so careful up until now?" Catherine smiled coldly. "We make them think they've won. We make them greedy and careless." And before I continue with the plan we created, I really need you to hit that like button and subscribe, because what comes next is the strategic takedown that you've been waiting for this entire video. Why does your subscription matter so much? Because when you subscribe, You're telling me that stories of justice and fighting back against manipulation deserve to be heard, and that gives me the strength to keep sharing even when it's hard. Have you ever had to pretend everything was fine while secretly planning your next move? Drop a comment and tell me about it because I want to hear how you fought back. Liking this video helps it reach more people who need to know they're not alone in dealing with toxic family members, so please take 2 seconds and click that button. The plan was brilliant and risky. David and I would agree to the investment. We'd even go to the bank and initiate the transfer. But Catherine would have already put legal holds in place to prevent the money from actually moving. Meanwhile, I would wear a wire during all interactions with Patricia and Marcus, recording every conversation, every admission, every piece of evidence we needed. They'll be confident once they think the money is coming, Catherine said. That's when people get sloppy, when they start talking freely about what they've done. David looked sick at the thought of deceiving his own family, even though they'd been deceiving us all along. I know this is hard, my father said, putting a hand on David's shoulder. But they were willing to drug your wife. They don't deserve your loyalty anymore. We went back to Patricia's house that afternoon, and David called a family meeting. Patricia, Marcus, and Claire all gathered in the living room, their faces eager and excited. We've decided to do the investment, David announced, and I watched them try to hide their satisfaction. We're going to the bank tomorrow to transfer the $150,000. Patricia actually clapped her hands together like a child on Christmas morning. Oh, darling, that's wonderful. You won't regret this, I promise. The wire I was wearing under my shirt was recording every word. Marcus pulled out champagne, again with the champagne, and this time I accepted a glass, though I never brought it to my lips. To family, Marcus said, raising his glass. To taking care of each other. Over the next 3 days, I became someone I didn't recognize. An actress playing the role of naive, trusting Jessica while secretly recording conversations and collecting evidence. Patricia started getting careless, making comments about what she'd do with her share, and how this was easier than the last time. I'd gotten her to admit there was a last time, which was crucial. Claire got drunk one evening and actually laughed about how they'd played us so perfectly, using Emma's death as the ultimate distraction. Each word was recorded, each admission was documented. David was incredible, playing along while dying inside, asking his brother questions that got Marcus to reveal details about their entire scheme. We were building a case that would be impossible to defend against. But the hardest part was pretending everything was normal, smiling at these people across the dinner table while knowing what they'd tried to do to us. I'd lie in bed at night thinking about that champagne at the restaurant, wondering what would have happened if my father hadn't sent that message. Would I have woken up having signed documents I didn't remember signing? Would they have gaslit me into thinking I'd agreed to everything willingly? The rage I felt was consuming, burning in my chest like a fire that never went out. But I channeled that rage into focus, into determination, into making absolutely sure that when we struck, it would be devastating and final. And the day of reckoning was coming faster than they could have ever imagined. The morning we were supposed to transfer the money, I woke up feeling like a warrior preparing for the most important battle of my life. Catherine had coordinated everything with the police, and there would be officers waiting at the bank to witness the transaction and the inevitable confession she was sure would follow. David was quiet during breakfast, barely touching his coffee while Patricia buzzed around the kitchen talking about how proud she was of us for making such a smart decision. I wanted to throw my plate at her perfectly made-up face, but instead I smiled and thanked her for all her support and guidance. The words tasted like poison in my mouth, but I delivered them with Academy Award-worthy sincerity. I'm going to ask you one more time to please like this video and subscribe to the channel because we're about to get to the confrontation you've been waiting for this entire time. Why should you subscribe right now? Because what happens next is the moment when everything I've been planning comes together, and you deserve to see justice served after following this story for so long. Have you ever confronted someone who betrayed you? Tell me how it went in the comments because I want to know if you felt the same mix of terror and power that I felt that morning. Your like helps this video reach people who need to see that fighting back against manipulation is possible, so please don't skip this part. Just click that button. We all drove to the bank together. Me, David, Patricia, and Marcus, packed into Patricia's luxury SUV like we were going on some happy family outing. Claire had stayed behind, supposedly to start preparing the celebration dinner, but really because 3 conspirators showing up to a bank transaction would have looked too suspicious even for them. The whole drive, Marcus kept talking about the incredible returns we'd see, painting pictures of the life we'd have once this investment paid off. You could try for another baby without any financial stress, he said from the front seat, and I felt David's hand grip mine so tightly it hurt. They were still using Emma, still weaponizing our dead daughter, even now. The audacity was breathtaking. When we walked into the bank, I saw Catherine sitting in the waiting area pretending to read a magazine, and I spotted at least 2 plainclothes officers positioned near the exits. The bank manager, who Catherine had briefed the day before, greeted us with a professional smile and led us to a private office. "So you're looking to transfer $150,000 today?" she confirmed, looking at David and me. Patricia answered before we could. "Yes, it's an investment opportunity through my son Marcus here. Time sensitive, very important that we get this done today." The bank manager nodded slowly. "Of course. I'll just need everyone to provide identification, and I'll need to understand the nature of this investment for our records." That's when things started to unravel for them. The bank manager started asking questions, legitimate questions about where the money was going, what entity was receiving it, what documentation existed for this investment opportunity. Marcus fumbled through answers, pulling up fake documents on his phone, getting increasingly agitated as the questions continued. "Look, this is a private investment opportunity," he snapped. "We don't need to explain every detail to you." Patricia jumped in, her voice tight. "My son and daughter-in-law want to transfer their own money. Why is this so complicated?" The bank manager remained calm. "Ma'am, when large sums are involved, we have legal obligations to ensure the transaction is legitimate. I'm sure you understand." I watched Patricia's mask start to crack, watched Marcus's face turn red with frustration, and I knew we were close. Then David did something I'll never forget. He looked directly at his mother and said, "Mom, why don't you just tell them the truth? Tell them that this investment doesn't actually exist." The room went completely silent. Patricia's face drained of color, and Marcus froze like someone had pressed pause on him. "What are you talking about?" Patricia whispered, her voice shaking. David pulled out his phone and played one of the recordings we'd made, the one where Marcus and Patricia discussed splitting our money after telling us the investment had fallen through. Their own voices filled that small office, talking about how easy we'd been to manipulate, how the grief had made us perfect marks. Patricia's hand flew to her mouth, and Marcus looked like he might actually be sick right there on the bank's expensive carpet. The police officers came into the room then, badges out, and I watched Patricia's entire world collapse in real time. "Patricia Hoffman, Marcus Hoffman, you're under arrest for attempted fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and attempted administration of a controlled substance," one officer stated, pulling out handcuffs. Patricia started crying immediately, reaching for David. "Baby, please, you don't understand. We were trying to help you." David stepped back, shaking his head. Don't you dare try to spin this now." Marcus tried to run, actually tried to push past the officer at the door, but he was tackled and cuffed within seconds. The bank employees were standing in the doorway watching this family drama unfold like it was a television show. And honestly, I couldn't blame them because even I could barely believe this was really happening. This is the moment where I really need you to show your support. Hit that like button and subscribe because we're entering the final chapters of this story and you need to see how this ends. Why subscribe? Because you've come this far with me, you've heard the pain and the planning, and now you deserve to see the resolution and what I learned from all of this. Have you ever watched karma catch up to someone who wronged you? Tell me that story in the comments because those moments are so powerful and healing. Your subscription means everything to me and to this community we're building of people who refuse to be victims, so please, take that small action right now. After Patricia and Marcus were taken away in police cars, David and I sat in Catherine's office completely numb. "Claire is being picked up at the house as we speak," Catherine informed us, closing a folder. "With the recordings you collected and the evidence my investigator gathered about their previous scams, they're looking at serious prison time, 5 to 10 years, possibly more." I should have felt victorious, but instead I just felt empty, hollowed out by everything that had happened. David was crying, grieving the family he thought he had, realizing that his entire childhood had been built around people capable of such cruelty. "How do we move forward from this?" he asked, his voice breaking. My father, who'd arrived at the office, put his arm around both of us. "One day at a time. That's all anyone can do." The fear I'd been carrying for weeks, fear that they'd succeed, fear that I'd lose everything, fear that I was crazy for suspecting them, all of it started to dissolve. I'd spent so long feeling powerless, feeling like grief had made me weak and vulnerable, that I'd forgotten who I actually was. Jessica Miller wasn't some helpless victim waiting to be saved. I was a woman who'd survived the worst loss imaginable and still had the strength to fight back when people tried to exploit that pain. Standing up to Patricia, to Marcus, to all of them. It didn't erase what happened to Emma, but it reminded me that I was still here, still capable, still strong enough to protect myself and the people I loved. David and I moved out of Patricia's house that same day with help from my father and some friends. We didn't take anything that wasn't ours, didn't want a single item that carried memories of that place. As we drove away, I looked back at that huge colonial house with its perfect hedges and thought about how much evil can hide behind beautiful facades. "Are we going to be okay?" David asked as we pulled onto the highway. I reached over and took his hand. "Yeah, we're going to be better than okay. We're going to heal, together, the right way this time." And for the first time since losing Emma, I actually believed those words. The fear that had controlled me for so long, fear of my own emotions, fear of trusting my instincts, fear of standing up for myself, was gone. In its place was something stronger, certainty. Certainty that I could survive anything. Certainty that I deserved better than people who would exploit my pain. Certainty that my voice and my truth mattered. Patricia and Marcus had tried to make me small, tried to convince me that grief had made me incapable of thinking clearly, but they were wrong. Grief had actually made me more perceptive, more aware, more willing to fight for what mattered. And that realization was more powerful than any revenge could ever be. The weeks following the arrests were a blur of legal proceedings, police statements, and media attention that I never wanted or expected. Apparently, Patricia and Marcus's previous victims came forward once they heard about the arrests, and suddenly our case became part of a much larger pattern of fraud. Catherine worked with the prosecutor to build a case so solid that their defense attorneys couldn't find a single crack in it. The recordings I'd made were the centerpiece. My voice, staying calm and asking careful questions that got them to confess everything. "You were smarter than they ever expected," Catherine told me during one meeting. "They thought grief had made you weak, but you turned that assumption into your greatest weapon." I want to take a moment here to ask you to please like this video and subscribe to the channel, because what I'm about to share is how intelligence and strategy beat manipulation every single time. Why does your subscription matter? Because content that shows people how to think strategically about their own situations, how to gather evidence and protect themselves, that content saves lives and relationships. Have you ever outsmarted someone who underestimated you? Share that victory in the comments, because I want to celebrate with you. Every like and subscription helps this channel grow and helps other people find these stories when they need them most. So please, be part of this community. I started seeing a new therapist, Dr. Sarah Pemberton, who specialized in trauma and family betrayal. In our sessions, she helped me understand that what Patricia and Marcus had done was a form of psychological warfare, and that my response, gathering evidence, staying calm, building a case, was actually a survival mechanism that showed incredible strength. Most people in your situation would have either confronted them immediately without proof or would have been successfully manipulated into signing away their money, Dr. Pemberton explained. The fact that you trusted your instincts, reached out for help, and executed a plan shows remarkable resilience and intelligence. Hearing that helped me reframe everything I'd been through not as victimhood, but as a battle I'd fought strategically and won. David and I started attending couples therapy together, working through the complex emotions of his family's betrayal. He struggled with guilt, feeling like he should have seen the signs, should have protected me better. "How did I not know?" he'd ask over and over. "How did I not see what my own mother was capable of?" Our therapist helped him understand that children are conditioned to trust their parents, that Patricia had been manipulating him his entire life, preparing him to be the perfect mark. "She raised you to never question her," the therapist said. "That's not your fault, David. That's her crime." Watching my husband process that trauma and come out stronger was almost as healing as my own journey. I started researching financial fraud, reading books about con artists and psychological manipulation, trying to understand the mechanics of what had been done to us. What I learned was chilling. People like Patricia and Marcus target those in crisis because grief, illness, divorce, any major life trauma makes people vulnerable and less likely to think critically. They use love and family bonds as weapons, knowing that most people won't suspect their own relatives of such cruelty. But I also learned about the patterns, the red flags, the warning signs that I could now recognize instantly. Knowledge became my armor, understanding became my shield, and I decided that I wasn't going to let this education go to waste. I started a blog, anonymously at first, sharing my story and the lessons I'd learned about protecting yourself from family financial fraud. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people reached out with their own stories of being scammed by relatives, of losing money to people they trusted. I created guides on how to document suspicious behavior, how to work with lawyers and investigators, how to protect your assets when you're going through emotional trauma. Turning my pain into purpose gave me something Patricia and Marcus could never take away: the ability to help others avoid what I went through. Intelligence isn't just about being smart, it's about using what you learn to build something meaningful, and that's exactly what I was determined to do. The trial happened 8 months after the arrests, and walking into that courtroom felt surreal. Patricia looked smaller somehow, diminished without her designer clothes and perfect makeup. Marcus wouldn't even look at us, keeping his eyes on the table in front of him. Claire had taken a plea deal, testifying against both of them in exchange for a reduced sentence, which gave the prosecution even more ammunition. David sat beside me, holding my hand so tightly I could feel his pulse racing through his palm. "You ready for this?" he whispered. I nodded, because I'd been ready for this moment since the day I heard them planning to destroy us. This is the final time I'm going to ask you to like and subscribe, and I really hope you will, because this is where justice is served, and you need to see how this story ends. Why should you subscribe? Because you've invested your time in this journey, and by subscribing, you're supporting content that shows people that fighting back is possible, that justice can happen, that you don't have to be a victim forever. Have you ever testified against someone or watched karma finally catch up? Drop that story in the comments because I want to hear how it felt. Your like right now means this video can reach someone who's currently being manipulated and needs to know there's a way out. So please, click that button. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand feeling more powerful than I'd felt in over a year. The prosecutor, a stern woman named Elizabeth Howard, asked me to explain what happened in my own words. I looked directly at Patricia as I spoke, describing the grief I'd felt after losing Emma, how vulnerable I'd been, how she'd exploited that vulnerability for money. I played the recordings in court, and watching the jury's faces as they heard Patricia and Marcus laughing about scamming us was deeply satisfying. "They used my dead daughter as a weapon," I said, my voice steady and strong. "They tried to drug me when I wouldn't comply. They had no remorse then, and I doubt they have any now." Patricia's lawyer tried to paint her as a desperate woman who'd made mistakes, tried to suggest that I'd misunderstood their intentions. But Catherine had prepared me for this, and I didn't waver. "I have recordings of them explicitly stating they plan to steal our money," I said calmly. "I have evidence of them purchasing Rohypnol with the intent to use it on me. These aren't mistakes or misunderstandings. These are calculated crimes." The defense attorney had nothing, absolutely nothing to counter with. David testified next, describing his own betrayal, his voice breaking as he talked about his mother choosing money over her own son. The jury was visibly moved, and I knew we'd won before the verdict was even read. Patricia was sentenced to 7 years in prison for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted poisoning. Marcus got 8 years because he had prior convictions that came to light during the investigation. Claire, with her plea deal, got 3 years probation and community service. As the judge read the sentences, I felt something release in my chest. Not happiness exactly, but closure. Justice. Validation that what happened to us was real, was wrong, and had consequences. Patricia cried and begged David to forgive her as they led her away, but he just turned his back. We walked out of that courthouse into bright sunshine, and I felt like I could breathe fully for the first time in a year. The victory wasn't just about them going to prison. It was about reclaiming my life, my power, my sense of self. I'd gone from a woman drowning in grief, being manipulated and controlled, to someone who'd fought back intelligently and won. David and I used some of our savings, the money they'd tried to steal, to buy a small house across town, far away from Patricia's neighborhood and all those memories. We planted a tree in the backyard for Emma, a cherry blossom that would bloom every spring and remind us that beauty can grow from pain. "We did it," David said as we stood looking at that sapling. "We actually did it." And I realized that "we" was the most important word in that sentence. We'd survived this together, and that made us unbreakable. Looking back now, 2 years after everything happened, I can see how that nightmare changed me in ways both painful and profound. I'm not the same Jessica Miller who sat in that nursery crying over what I'd lost. I'm someone who understands that grief doesn't make you weak. It reveals what you're actually made of. Emma's death will always be the most devastating thing I've ever experienced. But Patricia and Marcus's betrayal taught me that sometimes the cruelest wounds come from people who are supposed to love you. The combination of those two traumas could have destroyed me completely. And honestly, there were moments when I wanted to let it. But somewhere deep inside, I found a strength I didn't know existed, a determination to not just survive, but to make sure they never hurt anyone else again. Before we get to the final thoughts, I want to ask you one last time to please subscribe to this channel and hit that like button, because supporting content like this helps other people find these stories when they desperately need them. Why does it matter? Because someone watching right now might be in the early stages of being manipulated by family, and your subscription helps this video reach them before it's too late. Have you transformed a painful experience into personal growth? Tell me about your transformation in the comments, because those stories inspire me every single day. This community we're building is about more than just revenge stories. It's about reclaiming power and helping each other heal, so please, be part of that. The relationship between David and me went through a complete transformation after the trial. We'd been married for 8 years before Emma's death, but we'd never really been tested. Never had to face the kind of adversity that either breaks couples apart or forges them into something unbreakable. Watching him choose me over his family, seeing him stand up in court and tell the truth even though it devastated him, that showed me who he really was at his core. We went through intensive therapy together, learning how to communicate about the hard stuff, how to support each other through trauma without losing ourselves. A year after the trial, we decided to try for another baby, and I got pregnant with our son, James. Holding him for the first time, I felt Emma's presence, like she was giving us her blessing to move forward and find joy again. My relationship with my father became deeper than it had ever been. He'd saved me with that text message, but more than that, he'd believed me when I said something felt wrong. He'd taken action when he could have dismissed my concerns as grief-induced paranoia. I knew Patricia was trouble from the day David introduced her to us, he admitted one evening over dinner. She had this way of smiling that never reached her eyes, this need to control every conversation and situation. I didn't have proof back then, just instinct. But when you moved in with her and started sounding different on our phone calls, smaller somehow, I knew I had to do something. We talk every day now, and I make sure James knows his grandfather is a hero who saved his mother's life. The blog I started grew into something much bigger than I expected. Thousands of followers, speaking engagements at conferences about financial fraud and elder abuse, partnerships with legal organizations that help fraud victims. I've helped dozens of people recognize and escape situations similar to mine, connecting them with lawyers and investigators, walking them through the process of gathering evidence and protecting themselves. Every person I help feels like honoring Emma's memory, like making sure her short life had meaning beyond just my personal grief. Patricia tried to use my daughter's death as a weapon against me, but I transformed that pain into a shield for others. That's the ultimate victory. Taking what was meant to destroy you and using it to build something that helps people. What I learned about revenge is complicated and nuanced. Getting justice felt necessary and right. They needed to face consequences for what they did to us and to their other victims. But the real healing didn't come from watching them get sentenced. It came from rebuilding my life, from choosing to be more than what they tried to make me. Revenge, true revenge, isn't about destruction. It's about refusing to stay broken, refusing to let the people who hurt you define your future. Patricia and Marcus are in prison, but I'm free in ways I never was before. I'm free from the need to please people who don't deserve it, free from the fear of trusting my own instincts, free from the weight of caring what toxic people think about me. That freedom is worth more than any prison sentence could ever be. So here we are at the end of this story, and I want you to think about something important. What would you have done in my place? Would you have trusted that text message from my father and refused the drink, or would you have brushed it off as overthinking? Would you have had the strength to gather evidence while living with your betrayers? Or would you have confronted them immediately and lost your chance at justice? These questions matter because most of us will never know what we're capable of until we're tested by circumstances we never wanted to face. I didn't wake up one day as a strong person who could outsmart con artists. I became that person because I had no other choice, because the alternative was letting them win. After hearing my story, I hope you take away a few critical lessons that might save you or someone you love someday. First, trust your instincts even when everyone around you is telling you you're wrong, even when grief or trauma makes you doubt yourself. That voice inside you that says something isn't right, listen to it, investigate it, don't dismiss it just because it's uncomfortable. Second, document everything when you suspect manipulation or fraud, because without evidence, it becomes your word against theirs, and abusers are often very good at making their victims look unstable. Third, Reach out to people outside the situation, family, friends, professionals, because isolation is how manipulators maintain control. My father saved me because I stayed in contact with him, and he noticed changes in me that I couldn't see myself. Do you believe revenge ever truly brings peace, or does it just feed more anger? I've thought about this question constantly over the past 2 years, and here's what I've concluded. Revenge as pure destruction. Revenge that's only about hurting the people who hurt you. That probably doesn't bring lasting peace. But revenge as justice, as protecting yourself and others, as refusing to be a victim and fighting back strategically, that kind of revenge is actually self-respect in action. I don't spend my days thinking about Patricia and Marcus suffering in prison. I spend my days building a life they tried to take from me. That's the revenge that matters. Living well, loving deeply, helping others, and proving that their attempts to destroy me only made me stronger and more purposeful. What's your take on family betrayal and how we recover from it? Can relationships survive when trust is shattered so completely? Or is it better to cut ties and start fresh? David and I chose to cut ties with his entire extended family because we couldn't know who else might have been involved or complicit. Some people have told us that's extreme, that family is family regardless of what they do, but I fundamentally disagree with that philosophy. Family is supposed to be a source of love and support, and when family members choose to be predators instead, they forfeit the right to that title. We've built a chosen family now, friends who've proven their loyalty, my father, David's colleagues who supported us through the trial. Blood doesn't make you family. Love, trust, and mutual respect make you family. If you want more stories like this, stories about people who refused to stay victims and fought back against betrayal, manipulation, and injustice, then make sure to subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Drop a comment below telling me what part of this story resonated with you most. Was it the moment I got my father's text message, the confrontation at the bank, or the trial where justice was finally served? I read every single comment and I love connecting with all of you who are part of this community. Remember, you're stronger than whatever situation you're facing right now, and if I could survive losing my daughter and being betrayed by my husband's family and come out the other side not just intact but thriving, then you can survive your situation too. Thank you for watching, thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next video where I'll reveal what happened when Patricia tried to contact us from prison. Trust me, you won't want to miss that story.